We're not going to be upset if you get up and leave the room while we're talking. We're just going to keep right on talking, because that's obviously happened to all of us at some time before, and we're mostly friendly, and it's actually you get better buzz if and a better sense of the audience when folks are closer instead of way in the back.
Any of y'all want to move up?
No one's listening. It's like church. Or school. Everybody wants to be on the back row. Woo! All right. Woo! Don't tell my wife you said that. So. Well, welcome to this panel. My name is Denise Parker. I am the former mayor of the city of Houston, but I got some Houstonians on the front row giving me hell here. But I am currently the president and CEO of the LGBTQ Victory Fund and Victory Institute. So I'm going to give you a little bit of what we do at the Institute, and then I'm going to let my amazing panel here introduce themselves, and we're going to have a conversation about being out and lesbian and running for office. We're going to talk a little bit about intersectionality, what it means to be a woman running for office, what it means to be an out woman running for office, but generally about politics, what's happening right now, and what the lay of the land is around the country. Victory Fund is 27 years old this year, and it has one mission. We're the only national organization in our space, and that is that we only work with LGBT candidates. We don't endorse allies, we don't do policy, we don't do lobbying. It's about LGBT candidates. We are literally the love child of Emily's List. Some of the founders of Emily's List helped found Victory Fund. And not too long after we became Victory Fund, a bundling pack, we also became the Victory Institute, which is our C3 side. And we are sort of a life cycle organization for LGBTQ candidates. When you're running for office, we vet your campaigns, we may endorse you as a candidate, help you get to the finish line, and then once you're in elective office, we work to invest in your career and help you move through the process. Senator Tammy Baldwin is sort of the poster child for what the kind of work that Victory does. She was a county commissioner, she became a state rep, she became a member of Congress, now she's in the Senate. That kind of pipeline progression is what we like to see and what we're working to achieve. But the other important thing about Victory is not just that we work only with LGBTQ candidates, but we're at all levels of government. I happen to be here with panelists who serve in their state senates or their state houses, and one of the reasons that we focus there is because where does the bad stuff come mostly across America? The really atrocious bills that we're all embarrassed by comes out of our state legislatures. Mm-hmm. But at Victory, we care as much about a school board race and a city council race as we do about these state house races, or even the 5 candidates that we endorsed this year as out candidates for governor. Nationwide, if you go to our website, Victory, one of our websites, victoryinstitute.org, you can look up something called the Out for America map, and it will show you every sitting LGBT elected official in the United States. I'm not on the map anymore. I'm out of office for 2.5 years. But all the current LGBT elected officials, there are only 560 some odd. Number fluctuates a little bit, 560. There were 400 out LGBT candidates running across America this year. This is a wave year for our community. Just like this is a wave year, there are more women candidates than ever in American history. There are more candidates of color. There are more LGBT candidates than ever in American history. But it's important for us to talk as women who run for office. One, because of those candidates, or of those elected officials, only about 39% are women. And that's actually a better statistic than legislatures, our elective offices across the country. And what we have discovered is that our lesbian candidates win at a rate about 10% higher than our gay male candidates, but fewer of us run. And there may be some interesting discussion around that. So, well, actually, they tell me that the map says 559 and 219 are women. 9 of those are trans women. There are 4 trans men as well. There are only 13 trans elected officials currently across the United States, but that's up from 6 a year ago. So we're moving in the right direction, but a long way to go. One of the things that keeps me working at Victory, and I've been there 8 months, so it's not that long, but one of the things that keeps me going is that, so there's 559 of us. We need to elect 24,000 more LGBT elected officials across the United States to be at parity. So, yeah, we're moving in the right direction, but a long way to go there as well. So I'm going to start over on my right and move down, because the first thing I have to say is you may notice that Christine Hallquist is not here. Instead, we have Virginia Delegate Danica Rome. And love Christine Hallquist. She is a Victory-endorsed candidate for governor of Vermont, and an out-trans candidate running for governor. Great. But she actually hadn't been elected yet, so we actually have a candidate who has been elected and an office holder here to talk to us today. Coming in, we have Colorado represented for the Denver area, Leslie Herod, and welcome to Leslie. And then, let's see, veteran, pastor, Senator Pat Spearman. So Danica, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself, and then we're going to come back and really talk about campaigning and the nitty-gritty of politics.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you to my amazing other national colleagues. I guess we could go with that. My name is Danica Rome, and I am proud to represent the people of the 13th District of the Virginia House of Delegates as their delegate, representing the city of Manassas Park and the Prince William County portions of Haymarket, Gainesville, and my lifelong home, Manassas. And will my Virginia crew please make some damn noise? We've got our contingent here. They're small in number, but they are feisty, and that's how we like it. And so when I entered the race last year, at the time I was 32-year-old stepmom. I had worked for 9 years, 2 months and 2 weeks as the lead reporter of the Gainesville Times, covering my lifelong home community of Prince William County. So I authored more than 2,500 news stories about the greater Prince William County area, as in, with vetted facts instead of alternative facts. And I ran this race because Route 28 had been an absolute disaster for basically most of my life. My mother had been commuting up and down the 28 corridor since 1979, and there were no improvements done since the mid-1980s along 28 between Yorkshire and Centerville. So I decided to go do something about that. And I never attack a constituent, so instead I will simply say that in referencing the race last year, that the best contrast that I ever had on social issues was my mere presence in the race. I focused my campaign on traffic, jobs, and schools, on fixing Route 28, bringing high-paying jobs to Innovation Park, filling the office vacancies along Manassas Drive and Manassas Park, raising teacher pay so it's not the lowest in Northern Virginia, and expanding Medicaid to 3,700 of my uninsured constituents. And whenever it came down to dealing with LGBTQ issues, my mere presence was the automatic contrast against someone who had authored the constitutional amendment against marriage equality, authored the bathroom bill, 4 anti-LGBT bills just last year. The list goes on. And so my name last year in the headlines became transgender candidate. That is just basically every headline was just, like the most flagrant example last year was transgender candidate just wants to get rid of traffic. Just like, I'm not sure how the gender part affects the latter, but go on. And one of the things that I made sure to do is for people to know that I never did I'm trans, but I really care about this. No, I'm trans and. It was always trans and, not trans but. I'm trans and I can talk to you all day about water infrastructure. And if you want to know the difference between ductile iron pipes, good, cast iron water pipes, bad, talk to me outside because we can do a whole other panel about that. And I want to say yeah, I'm trans and I know a lot about transportation policy. I'm trans and I also care a lot about civil rights. I also care a lot about equality. I also care a lot about menstrual equity. And that's why I worked with these fine women to get that bill passed this year. You know, it's like I'm trans and I have to know a lot about a lot and a lot to be able to do my job as a delegate, so that the skill set I developed as a reporter, that was my chief qualification for office. Lifelong resident of my district who also covered the public policy issues of my district. I knew exactly what I needed to do to campaign, and that thing to do to campaign and do it effectively is to listen to the people of the 13th district and work their ideas into my policy platform. And now that I'm in office, my entire legislative agenda this year came from one of two categories: constituent service, as in the people who asked me to put in these bills, well, I put in the bills for them, and government accountability, because when I told the people of the 13th district last year that I would bring a reporter's eye to Richmond, well, I have. And that goes for my SHIELD law to protect credentialed reporters from facing jail time for protecting a source, and we're going to be working real hard to get that thing passed next year, along with two bills dealing with FOIA, another that would have created a publicly searchable cold case database so the public can help police solve murders across the state. I think that when you are a trans person or an LGBTQ person in general running for office, the narrative on a national level or a statewide level is always going to be about your identity. You don't run away from that, but it's part of your story. It is not the entirety of your story. And when it comes to dealing with constituent service issues, you represent LGBTQ people too, and they have their needs that you need to take care of just like anyone else. LGBTQ healthcare is healthcare. It is not a, it is mandatory. We are following our doctor's orders. It is not optional. And we have to recognize that. At the same time, I've got to recognize that my constituents have a horrible commute, and that has to be my #1 issue dealing with them. So you keep focusing on core quality of life issues, and then you go deliver on those in office, and things will work out for you.
Representative Herod, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am State Representative Leslie Herod. I represent a small town in Colorado called Denver. I am the first African-American LGBT person to hold elected office in Colorado. Thank you. And I am proud to have been elected to my seat in 2016 with the highest vote count in Colorado history.
Woo!
So that just goes to tell you that as LGBT candidates and as LGBT candidates of color, we can run and we can win. That's for sure. So I sit on the House Judiciary and Finance Committees. I work primarily on issues of incarceration, homelessness and youth homelessness, Colorado entrepreneurs, and ensuring that we have a thriving economy that affects all of us, as well as women's reproductive justice and how we treat women in corrections and in prisons. So dignity, right? Ooh, shady. It's ridiculous. We have to work on these things, but we do. And so I'm really proud to serve my districts and my constituents in my district. But more importantly, I'm proud to represent the entire state of Colorado. We are one of the most beautiful states in the land. You might think your state is #1, so we'll go back and forth on 1 and 2. But it is a really great state with a thriving economy, but a lot of folks are being left behind. And so when we have people who are representing, who live at the intersectionality or at the intersections, we're able to pass forward policy that's really the best policy for all of us. And so that's really where I work and how I work. So when I ran my race, I was running and I had never seen another African-American LGBT person serve in Colorado. I had only seen one African-American female serve in Colorado, and then it became 3. So I was always thinking that I was going to be a staffer. So I started working as an aide. Any aides in the house or interns or anyone who's ever been an aide or intern? Okay. You guys do great work. I started working as an aide and an intern, and then I moved up to being nonpartisan staff. I became our governor's senior policy advisor, and I also worked to help elect someone you might know as President Barack Obama in 2012 as his Colorado deputy political director. So it was always my path to be behind the scenes, but I was always very active in my community. And so when I had a conversation with President Obama, when I had the conversation with State Representative Rosemary Marshall, who served previously, and they said, you know what, I think it's time that you step up and you run. Why can't you? Why shouldn't you? We know who you are. You're active in the community. You know this community better than any other candidate who is considering this race. You need to get in. Now, it took me about 7 times of asking before I actually said yes, but I will tell you that the support I got from my community was overwhelming, but also the support I got from the Victory Fund helped me put me over the top and ensure that I won. The Victory Fund was my first national endorsement in a competitive primary, which we often don't get. Some of my major donors came directly from the Victory Fund, which in Colorado we have $400 limit. So if you give $25 a week, you're also a major donor. I am campaigning as well. But yeah, I think both of us are here. But it is very important, you know, to have organizations and have that support early on when folks are saying, I don't know if we can get involved in this race just yet. Well, I tell you, if you don't get involved in the race just yet, especially in primaries, that means you are keeping out diversity, because we are running in tough primaries where you're going to find people of color, where you're going to find LGBT folks, where you're going to find LGBT people of color, and queer people is in those really competitive primaries. And then that's when we're able to move up through the ranks. And so I really appreciate everyone who's here today. I appreciate your interest in this issue. We can run and win. We are running, and actually we are more likely to win if we are LGBT candidates. Did anyone know that? We are more likely to win. So if any of you guys in this room are considering running, now is the time to do it, because, you know, you're going to win. So it'll be good. Thank you.
So Senator Spearman, I've been corrected on how I pronounce the name of your state. So Nevada. Senator Spearman.
Good morning, everybody. I am State Senator Pat Spearman, and I represent most of North Las Vegas in Nevada. I spent most of my life in the military. I served almost 30 years, 29 and a half, and had a medical retirement. But the interesting thing about that is that I served in the closet. I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I served before that. And I tell people, you know, it's amazing that I even have my sanity, because that was really nerve-wracking. You never know when the call is going to come for the colonel wants to see you, and, you know, and somebody has said this or somebody has said that, and, you know, you make sure that you don't date crazy people. Make sure you date somebody.
How do you do that? I'm gonna...
you know, somebody who has as much to lose as you do. I mean, all the things that we had to do. And as I moved up the ranks, I tried to make it a point to help some of the either lower enlisted or junior officers learn how to navigate that. So when I retired, I'm also a ordained minister and have pastored several churches. While I was in the military, I worked with chaplains, also worked with civilian churches, church pastors, etc. So I've got that piece. I'm seminary trained, which comes in handy a lot of times, especially when I introduced marriage equality on the floor and addressed each one of those oppositional points using the Bible. And so that was quite interesting to watch people squirm. So I retired, and my last assignment was at the Pentagon. And when I retired, I moved to Nevada to pastor a United Methodist church. Well, I had said once I got out of the service, I was not going to be in the closet anymore. And I kind of came halfway out, because the United Methodist Church would take your credentials, and you would not be allowed to pastor or participate in any cleric level. So I was halfway in and halfway out. And I tell people, before I came all the way out, I was in a glass closet. You would have really had to be not looking to know that I wasn't. And finally, you know, marriage equality, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell debate came around, and I heard Senator McCain say, well, we don't want gay people in the service because it will hurt our morale. And I thought to myself, dude, we have people who are already in there, and there are some of us who are buried in Arlington National Cemetery and other military cemeteries around the country. And I thought about the story of a person that I met while at the Pentagon. Someone else sent them to me knowing that I was a minister. And I'll give you the brief story. They were in a relationship, a long-term relationship, for about a little bit more than 10 years. Both of them were in the National Guard. One was sent to Iraq, and the other one, stayed behind. Their platoon didn't go. And so someone called and said, one day said, have you heard from so-and-so? And they're like, no. Oh, okay. And they said, why did you ask? They said, well, nothing. You might just want to go and check with the company and, see what's going on. And so they went to the company headquarters to ask about their partner. Of course, we didn't have marriage equality at that time, and company headquarters wouldn't give them any information. And a few days later, they're watching TV, and they see the name of their partner appear as killed in action. And the parents called and said, you are the reason that our child is dead, the sinful life that you led them into, and this was God's wrath on them. And if you come anywhere near this funeral service or the memorial or anything, then we are going to out you. And so the person did not attend, but what they did was they went to the cemetery and watched from a tree not far from the gravesite, and when everybody left, they rushed over and leaned down and got there just in time to touch the top of the flowers as the coffin was being lowered into the ground. And I thought about that, and I thought about what Senator McCain had said, and I thought, oh no, I cannot be silent anymore. I can't do it. And so I told people in my church, I told the leadership first, and many of them said, well, Pastor, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't change who you are. I said, okay, well, thank you. And then told some others, and the Saturday night before Christmas, I told the rest of the church at the Christmas party. And the Sunday, that next day, we had 7 people in service, where the Sunday before we had close to 100. And there were people who said to me, well, I just can't sit under a gay pastor. I said, but you've been doing it for 4 years? It's just that now you know. Some of the people who left were people who I had gone into my pocket and personally paid their rent or utility bills or different things, and called me. The parent was in the hospital in Houston, and they didn't have a pastor there, and called me, and I did all those sorts of things. So here's the point. I did all of that leading up to them asking me in 2012 to run against a 15-year incumbent who killed the bill to add transgender persons to the hate crime protected class, for the person who was staunchly against gay marriage, for the person who didn't say a whole lot but everybody knew that they were kind of like a closet racist, if you will. So everything that I am, he was against. And I had fun running. It was a really tough race, and I agree with what Leslie said. It's those primaries that we enter into that where we really need more support even than in the general election. And so I managed to win. We couldn't raise a lot of money, but I was out knocking doors and had a lot of people that agreed with what we said. And during the course of that campaign, there were people who were saying to their people in their Sunday school, I think she's gay. And somebody said, yeah, she is. Didn't you see her on the news or whatever? So it was no secret. And I think that was the biggest the biggest asset that I had during that race. So I've served for 6 years. The first bill that I passed was the bill to protect transgender persons under the Hate Crimes Act. And a number of other bills along the way, but the one that I carried and we got passed last time, I want to say to all of you, because Don't Ask, Don't Tell is no longer the law in the military, if you were discharged under that, you can get your discharge upgraded. Because most people had either a dishonorable conduct unbecoming or whatever, and they have no veterans benefits now. So you can get that upgraded. Not a lot of people know that, and that's why I carried the bill last time to require the Nevada State Veterans Commission to develop a program of outreach to veterans and make sure that anyone who called them, they were able to navigate and help them get their discharge upgraded. The first person who was able to take advantage of that was a lady who was 72 years old, who was discharged in the 60s and had an illness that was connected to her military service. So I'm glad to be serving, and that's not all that I do, but that's one of the things that I always think about as I serve, because I am the only one of me in the legislature, in the Senate, or in the Assembly. I forgot to tell you, in spite of all of that, I did retire as a lieutenant colonel.
So you can already tell that these are three remarkable women. Danica is very new in her career. This is her first term. I guess you're in your second term?
Second term.
And you're in your
Going in a second.
going into your second term. But you can tell also that there's no one path to political success. One was a reporter and not at all closeted about her heavy metal proclivities on the end. One was a staffer for other politicians, elected officials, and then the military and pastor. So there's no one route. But I'm going to ask Leslie, because you mentioned you use the phrase intersectionality, and I'm sure it's getting thrown around a lot at this conference. I do think there are things that we face as women that are different than the things we face as being from the LGBT community. And then you add race on top of that. Were there places where your different identities were like kind of conflicted in campaigning, or were you ever confronted along those lines?
I'll tell you, in campaigning, it was pretty tough to out me because I was pretty out. I had already been working with the black churches on LGBT issues for years. I frequented First Friday, our women's night, quite often as well. And so I wasn't going to be someone who was going to be not out when I ran. It was not an option for me, nor was it authentic for who I was. So when I ran in my primary, yes, of course, my opponent and his supporters did begin to whisper a few different things at the doors. One, if they saw, an older black door, it would be, well, do you know she's gay? She thinks she's going to win just because she's gay. That was a way of outing me in a way that was more positive, I guess. To which they said, oh, yeah, I saw her at New Hope this weekend. She's great. Which is our Baptist church. Or they would go to a door where they would find an older white man and say, well, we just think Leslie thinks she just is supposed to have this seat because she's black. And she's just running because she's black, and that's all she cares about. And they were like, okay, well, let me introduce you to my wife, who is also black. Because what my opponent didn't realize is actually Park Hill is a safe haven for interracial couples when they couldn't live anywhere else. And so these older doors with white gentlemen answering, a lot of times they had a black wife standing behind them, wasn't quite happy with the conversation they were hearing. Now, of course, that's just what I heard back, right? So there was other conversations that I didn't necessarily hear back all the time, but those were some things that happened in my district. So, I didn't hide it, though. I put it on my website, it was in my conversations on my social media. I didn't hide the fact that I was LGBT, because I don't think that I needed to, but also, I don't hide the fact that I'm black or a woman either. So why hide that part of myself? Now, as a LGBT woman who looks the way that I do, I have a certain privilege in that people don't always identify me as LGBT. So on top of that, though, I pretty much come out every single day. So I do talk often about the fact that I am LGBT so people understand and people start to change the perception that they have of just one type of monolithic community, right? When we're all so different. I mean, look at this amazing room. We're all so different, and that is who we are as LGBT people. So that's something that I experienced running. Now, I will tell you, though, my identities have never been more in conflict than this year when I was working to pass a bill in Colorado that reauthorized the Civil Rights Commission and Division. As some of you guys may know, Colorado has been on the forefront of a very contentious civil rights battle with the Master P. Cake Shop case in the Supreme Court that happened right in Colorado. So at the time that the courts were determining the outcome of Master P's, we were debating whether or not the Civil Rights Commission and Division could even continue. And the conservatives decided to pull the funding for the Civil Rights Commission and Division, which had been operating for years, since the 70s. But more recently, we included LGBT protections. And my colleagues decided to use the argument that when you have LGBT protections in our Civil Rights Code and enforced by our Civil Rights Division and Commission, that placed our Commission and Division at conflict and our values at conflict. Because you can't be religious and be gay. And you can't be a religious person and serve gay people. That's ridiculous, right?
That's the kind way.
That's the kind way to put it. But it's also very familiar to me as a black woman. When we have been told time and time again, and religion has been used to discriminate against us for generations, right? But if you take away the division, you're also taking away protections for people of color, for women, for people who are differently abled, right? So all these identities came together to have this conversation about what we're going to do with the Civil Rights Commission and Division. And I sit in front of my colleagues and they tell me how conflicted they are because they're religious. And I think one of the things that I do less of that I need to do more of is come out as a Christian too. Right? Because I am a Christian and I do go to church and I am supported by my church community. And that is not at conflict. So there's no conflict that resides in me being a Christian and being a black queer person. In fact, I believe very wholly that they come together. And so by saying that it's Christians who want to discriminate against LGBT people, I believe that is a lie. I believe that's misleading, and I don't believe it's Christian or any type of religion at all. And so we had that very pointed conversation because I think it's time that we stop allowing people to use Christians as a broad umbrella to bring down LGBT people. I believe that's why so many folks are alienated from the church, but also it's just not true, right? It's just not true. And so having that conversation and allowing folks to talk to me and see me as an out, queer, black Christian, and then having the conversation with my colleagues about, you know what? I've come to your districts. I've been to your homes. You have treated me with nothing but respect. Why would you want to create an environment in Colorado that would allow for me to be discriminated against, that would allow for me to be humiliated and denied services that I need? Because you say your Christian identity is at conflict. It wasn't at conflict when you served me a meal at your house or when you asked me to vote yes on your bills. So it shouldn't be one here today. So I will tell you that we did pass the reauthorization of the Civil Rights Commission and Division. We made the division and commission even stronger. And I'm proud to say that although there might be some misconceptions around what the Supreme Court ruled, they upheld our right in Colorado to have non-discrimination protections for LGBT people, period.
Thank you. Senator Spearman, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, and that is that you, like Danica, took out an incumbent. And you, and again, like, actually, delegate, I should call you by your titles in this panel. Delegate Rome.
We're all friends here. It's okay.
I'm gonna call you mayor. Just call me Dan.
Took out,
If you just call me on time for dinner, I'm happy.
that's all right. Took out, but yeah, took out a significant opponent to LGBT rights. Is that why you ran? And was that an issue in the campaign, or did you have a broader reason for running?
That was not why I ran, but like Leslie, I didn't run away from who I am. I had only been totally out of the closet for about 3 years and was still celebrating my freedom. So that's not why I ran. The big issue for the incumbent was voting to do some commercial property at Lake Tahoe, and that would have just about destroyed the environmental balance there. And so that's what I ran on. I also ran on economic development through using our energy resources in Nevada. One of the ones that wasn't being talked about was geothermal, so I talked about that. I also ran on improving access to health care because many people in my church, although they had insurance, still did not have access to full health care. They could go and pay the copayment, but they couldn't afford the prescription. I also ran because I know that health care issue cuts across the lines, especially to trans women, because many times when they go to get health care, people do not recognize who they are now. They always want to go back to where they used to be. So that wasn't why I ran, but I also ran with that. And I would say to people, my eyes are hazel, but you don't call me the hazel-eyed candidate. My hair, depending upon what I want to do, it's either, light brownish blonde or dark brown or whatever, but you don't call me that. So this is a part of who I am. It's not all of who I am, and I am also proud of who I am. I also had an opportunity to do some educating for people who go to church on Sunday and the rest of the week they forget what they heard. So I had an opportunity to talk to them about that and to talk about unconditional love and to remind them that in the Bible there's only one place that God specifically talks about an abomination with respect to Sodom and Gomorrah, and that was when they were not taking care of the widows, they were not taking care of the children. And so I tell them, go to this scripture and read this, and read it out loud. And so once they do that, it's rather impossible for them to talk about it. So running, I didn't run as that, and I don't allow people to pigeonhole me. I say if you're going to pigeonhole me as a member of the LGBTQ community, then you're also going to have to pigeonhole me as a veteran because I served my country. And by the way, I served my country for you to have the right to say whatever you want to about me, okay? Did you serve? Drop the mic.
Yes.
So, Senator Spearman, you said exactly what I hoped you would say. You mentioned issues important to your constituents. So, Delegate Rome is the poster child right now for running on an infrastructure issue and running it right into office. But you also took on an incumbent. And was it the infrastructure issue, or was it the incumbent that got you into the race?
I was, like most women, I was asked to run, and it didn't take a lot of convincing. So we have heard in studies and data that men will often take the initiative to run, whereas women are often asked to run. And just show of hands, how many cisgender straight white men are in this room today? All right, wait, hold them up. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Okay. How many of you are not that? Okay. So,
Don't be shy.
No, this not for the folks who are in this room today. Y'all are great. Very often, we know that the grand, overwhelming majority of elected officials across America are cis, straight, white men, right? They aren't coming to us to deal with our issues. We have to go to them to deal with our issues, right? At the same time, we also have to work on those issues that are those core quality of life issues that unite the most number of people. And once we are elected in office, that's where we answer that question of, well, is that really why you're in it? Do you really care about fixing roads? Do you really care about all those other things? Are you just really doing this for, that other reason? Water infrastructure? No, that other reason. Rates and teacher pay? No, the other one. Right, civil rights for people because we're all human beings. That's the one. I found that getting into the race for being asked that my motive on my policy part was clear, that I knew exactly what I wanted to run on the day that I was asked to do it on Fixing 28, and at the same time, in my personal opinion, and it was validated by 12,077 people at the ballot box last year, that the phrase that I used was Delegate Marshall Delegate Marshall's legislative priorities are more focused on where I go to the bathroom than how you get to work. That one sentence answered put out four things for us right from the get-go. Number one, it took care of the trans part. Done. Number two, it took care of the contrast, so we had that. Number three, it put my top priority on the line, transportation. And number four, it contrasted with the issue that, he held a press conference on last year when he introduced a bill about it. So right in one sentence, I was able to address all of these issues, right? And at the same time, I think that when you run against an incumbent, on the one hand, yes, it is a referendum on that person's record, but what I set out to do is I knew that I would have a disproportionate amount of attention drawn to my campaign, and that I would keep that attention every single time. It was always going to be, my identity was going to be that headline, and it was going to be the lead of the story. I wanted the reader or the viewer to get beyond that first part, and because I talked about public policy and constituent service stuff so much that they would inevitably have to come across it. And that if I phrased it in the way that drew the attention, but also made the contrast within that same sentence, that I would get my message out in doing so. And we did phenomenally well in terms of doing that. And a lot of that, look, in the Democratic primary, when you were talking earlier about hey, here's what happened, in your primary, in mine, we were very fortunate in that the candidates, all four of the Democratic candidates who ran, we all had positive campaigns. We didn't go and attack each other, and we all knew that we were going to coalesce around the winner and go win, right? At the same time, I would hear other things from some volunteers from the other campaigns, or other people would say, just like, a trans person can't win this race. Mm-hmm. So you need to go for someone who's more conventional. You need to go for someone who's this or this. And I got an email from one constituent, or now constituent, then voter, who said, someone from one of the other campaigns came to my door and said, don't vote for Danica, she's transgender. A transgender person can't win this race. You need to vote for my candidate. And she goes, well, I'm in an interracial marriage, and I was told never to be a part of that. I was told I shouldn't be able to do that, that I shouldn't be able to, that even though this is who I am, as my ability to love another human being, that I was told that's a problem for me. So no, I don't think that's true at all. I think that if you're going to work hard, you can absolutely go win. You go win being yourself. And that's what she told me in that email. She said, and that's why I voted for you. Well, that one's going in the frame later. And I want that message to get out, that you can win because of who you are, not despite it. And that, as Mayor Parker knows, because we've done a lot of events together and we've talked a lot over the last year, that LGBTQ candidates in general, we understand empathy and compassion, and that we have to reach out to other people who might not look like us, or have our backgrounds, or have any of our same identifiers, because we know what it means to have to overcome obstacles to be able to succeed in the first place. Never tell me why I can't do something. Tell me what I have to overcome in order to do something.
That's right.
And then I'll go do it. I'm going to call on all of you to reject the nihilism that this country is so broken that it's beyond repair, because in a representative democracy within a republic, we, The people are the ones who make the change, right? And when we've been left out, and historically folks like us have been left out, which is why we have to have a panel about this in the first place to talk about it. When we've been left out in the first place, that means we need more people with the courage to be visible, the courage to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there, because every single time that you put yourself out there, even when it seems like you have to move a mountain in order to win an election, the bottom line is you are making it easier for the next generation and the next person to come after you to be able to do that. I didn't have a template to run and win as a trans person in Virginia, but what I did have was a few things. Number one, work ethic, that I was willing to knock on doors, I was willing to make phone calls, and I was willing to win. Number two, I had a kick-ass campaign team. My staff ruled. My staff was awesome. Next, I had volunteers who came in from across the Commonwealth, from across the DMV area, and even across the country. Across the country flew in to knock on doors, or they would phone bank in their home states. We had that level of support, and so we got a lot of, we had a lot of support from within and from the country. And also, I had the Victory Fund, y'all. Leslie was talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
Victory came, I had in the primary, I had two game changer endorsements. The first came from the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. That was the first one that really helped turn the ball for us, because we just had, they did an email blast, and like money came in very quickly when we needed it. And we were able to, get that credential. Then when Victory Fund came in, I told them, hey, this is how much we need to raise in order to, get our last couple mailing pieces out, because the other candidates were out mailing me 2 to 1 and had outraised me by tens of thousands of dollars. But I had a lot more small dollar donations, a lot more. I was like number 1 in the state last year for that. I had more donations between $1 and $100 last year than the entire Republican caucus combined times 2. That's people power. And the donations that came in from the Victory Fund, that funded my advertising, because that's the most expensive part of the deal. But those small dollar donations, that took care of my day-to-day operations so I could pay for my staff. That $25, $5 donation that, someone might be willing to give, $100 or, $1 even, and we have plenty of those. There is a point for that. There is things that goes to help a campaign win. And then when the big checks arrive, there are things that those go to help a campaign win. We have to have an all of the above campaign in order to win. That means that you're out hustling. That means that you're out getting your message out. And yes, you're talking to reporters. I hate it when I hear people say, like, well, you need to be vague with your policy and don't talk to press because they're just out to get you and whatever. No. When you're running for government, you are to be held accountable as a candidate and when you're in government, period. And I don't want to vote for someone who's too scared of the 4th estate for them to do their job in the first place. Maybe it's because I come from, 10 and a half years of professional reporting, and maybe I have a degree in journalism, but I am going to tell you that is a core tenet of my belief, is that go out there, and if you know what you're doing, if you're a good candidate and you're solid on public policy issues, then you shouldn't be afraid of a reporter anyway, because then that story just amplifies your message and gets it out. And if you know that your message is better than the person you're running against, then you shouldn't be afraid of anyone. And at that point, you should go out there and you should just go dominate your race. And that's exactly what we did, to the tune of an 8-point victory.
Okay, yeah, there's that other mic drop. Yeah. So, Representative Herod and Delegate Rome both said that they were asked to run. And there's lots and lots of data on this. Women wait to be asked, and they usually have to be asked multiple times. One of our theories as to why our lesbian candidates, looking back over the entire history of our endorsements at Victory, our lesbian candidates do better, is that they actually tend to be later in their careers, and that they're more qualified. There's some other data that says that, and actually as someone who has hired a lot of people over the years, if you post a job and you say there are 5 qualifications and a guy has 3 of them, he absolutely believes he's qualified and he'll put his name in the hat. And if he has 2, he might do it just to see, what the hell, you might say yes. But women want to have all 5. And they wait to hit that perfection. And I will tell you that when I ran my first race, I was talked into that race, persuaded to run. You didn't mention that, Pat. I don't know if that was something that you were self-directed, or did people come to you and say you ought to run?
Yeah, they did. And what happened, I was right in the middle. I was just starting the research for my doctoral degree, and I had done a lot of work in 07, 8, and 10 on different campaigns. And the person who was originally supposed to run for that seat said to the people who were pulling together the campaign the Friday before the last day to file that he didn't think he could win. And if a candidate doesn't think they can win, then they won't win. You have to go in knowing that, yes, you might lose, but you have to go in saying, I am going to win. And you have to, even if that means that you have to talk yourself into it on a daily basis. So when he said that, they were, around the table, and we're trying to figure out, okay, so who do we get? Because we've got to make sure that this guy does not go back. If he goes back, he will probably change his D to an R, because he votes with them most of the time. So I got a call on a Friday. First I got a text message, give me a call, and got another text message, give me a call, and I finally called, and the person said, Pastor, we really need somebody to run for this seat. And I said, okay, so you want me to think about somebody? And I'm like, wow, I don't know. And she said, no, we want you to run. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, we want you to run because we think that you'll be just the person to take him out. And the fact that I am pretty plain spoken, and I'm not a shrinking violet, and I don't care who it is, and it doesn't matter to me what their stature is. If you challenge me, I'm coming back. And that's probably because as an African American, as a woman, I had to fight my way to for every promotion I got in the military. And anybody who served before the 90s, I was commissioned in 77. I had to fight for everything. And so a fight doesn't scare me. And when people tell me you can't do it, that's like saying to a pit bull, sick 'em. And I'm off, okay? So yeah, I was asked, and, people were saying, well, he's got this and he's got that, and he's got, a $250,000 war chest. I'm like, okay. And he has, okay. And I remember on one of the television shows, one of the announcers said to me, well, it sounds like you have a really good handle on all of the issues, and I can see your passion, but he's got the name recognition. I said, nobody knows him. Well, he's got, all of this money. I said, so? And she said, well, I just don't think you can win. And then she turned to, her co-anchor and was getting ready to say something. And I grabbed the mic. I said, listen, I'm a black woman with nothing left to lose. Hard, I know. Easy, I don't understand, okay? I'm going to win. Woo! So I was asked, and I brought all of me to the table.
Well, but you also recently lost a race.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that to the women in the room I want to say, and there's a lot of data on this too, that when women lose a race, they tend to stop. Actually, they have this kind of dialogue. When men lose a race, they say, what was wrong with those people? And when women lose a race, they say, what was wrong with me? I lost my first 2 political races, and I figured out how to win, and I won 9 after that. But you just jumped into a congressional race. You didn't have to give up your Senate seat, which made it a little bit easier for all of us out there rooting for you. But knowing that it was an uphill battle, you jumped into the race. What did you take away from the loss?
You can't stop fighting, and to understand that. Here's one of the things that happened when the Supreme Court said that we had the right to marry who we want, and it didn't matter, what our gender was, et cetera. Some of us in this struggle, we kind of stopped and said, we've arrived, but we haven't. Just because the law changes doesn't mean that hearts and minds will change. And so, like Leslie, there was a whisper campaign that was going on to people and saying, you don't really want a lesbian to represent you in Congress, do you? And so for some of the people who weren't quite there for full equality, it made them stop and think. The other thing that I took away from the race is that the intersectionality of my ethnicity, my gender as a woman, and my identification for my affectional orientation, all of those things kind of come together, and anybody who is living in this world of number 45, you know that people who used to not think or used to not say things like that, they feel like they are emboldened. So the other thing that I took away from it is I've got to make sure that we are still educating people that the battle is not over. The battle is not, the struggle still continues. And if we stop and we sit back, then we will find all of the gains that we have made, we will slowly but surely begin to lose them. So I had to run as an African American, I had to run as a woman, I had to run as a member of the LGBTQ community, but I also ran as a veteran, also ran as a pastor. But it was those first three things that for some people it was difficult for them to get over, and that let me know we still have work to do. Because, if you look at me, I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm a member of the LGBT community. The only way you can be more marginalized is to be Charlie Brown. So
I'm going to open it up to audience questions here in a second, but I want to let you close this out, Representative Herod. One of the things I hear across the country as I'm traveling for victory is that people want candidates who are authentic. And doesn't necessarily mean to be blunt spoken, but they want to hear the truth from candidates. How do you communicate with your constituents, and what does that mean to you, that authenticity phrase?
I think it's the number one reason why we're up here on this table as elected officials is because we are authentic candidates. That is why we won. It's because we were real people that people could relate to and understood that we had our own challenges, our own things that we face every day. And so I know my brother's watching, so I'm just going to say hi, Marcus. Thanks for the messages. He's down in Florida. But one of the reasons why I work so much on issues of mass incarceration and criminal justice reform is also a part of my personal story and mental health. So my mom grew up in Oakland, California. Any Oaklands in the house? All right. But she was in a really tough marriage that didn't work out. She had a child with her husband. It didn't work. And so she thought she would decided to join the military to kind of start a new life. She joined the military, she met my father, and they traveled around to different stations across the country. Eventually, my brother and I were born and did our thing. But in the mix, my sister, soon after my mom had left, who chose to stay with her father in California and her friend, she was in high school, but she got pretty caught up on drugs. And pretty soon after that, she was in and out of the criminal justice system. So me growing up, it was watching her kind of struggle through that. It was me seeing her show up in Colorado sometimes and other times not be around. Eventually I realized that meant she was incarcerated, that she was in custody somewhere. But I also started to realize that every time I saw her might be the last time I saw her. It made me wonder why we had a criminal justice system that was so unjust that they kept putting her in jail, and she kept finding herself in these positions where she kept making the wrong decisions. And like, what are you doing, right? But so you see me as an elected official, my brother who's an anesthesiologist, and you think, oh, you guys have like the Cosby life or something's going on there. But that's not true. It's not true in my family, and it's not true in so many families. And so I work for things like tampons in corrections because I knew what it meant to have to send my sister money on her books, right? And we passed it in Colorado. Because I know how that felt. And when I talked to my sister recently, she said, drugs were never my problem, Les. And I was like, okay, all right. But then I found out that she had experienced sexual trauma around that same time. And she never got help for that trauma. And it continued, right? It happened again and again and again. And so when we are living in societies that treat folks who are incarcerated like they should have no dignity or that they are inhuman, that doesn't help any of us. It's the wrong thing to do, right? But on top of that, if we're not serving people and providing mental health and substance abuse services in our communities in a way that's accessible to all of us, so that she could have that conversation when she needed to have that conversation, not after she turned to self-medication, we would be in a different position as a society right now and as communities. So that's why I work on the issues that I work on. That's why I talk about my sister's story as well as my brother's story and my own, because it's so important. So I recently had this kind of epiphany about why I've come into this work and why I've always been so active in helping out in communities. Well, it's because, of course, as communities, I was taken care of. I mean, I traveled around all the time. My community took care of me when my mom, she ended up being a single mom, couldn't be there. But then it's also because of my sister. So my brother's an anesthesiologist because he's trying to find ways to help people deal with their pain that's not opioids. And I'm working on mass incarceration because I know that the #1 reason why people are in our systems right now is because of mental health and addiction. And that our jails are our #1 provider of mental health and substance abuse services in every city across this country. That is not okay. So now when someone calls me and says, you know, Representative Herod, I'm in crisis. My son's in crisis, my daughter's in crisis, my whatever's in crisis, I need help. I have to tell them, give me 6 weeks and I can probably get you in somewhere. Please don't die. If it's really bad, you can go commit a crime and I could probably get you in a drug court. Or call the ER and get put on a 72-hour hold. I know you're going to come back out in 72 hours, but hopefully that helps. That is not the answer. That should never be the answer. So we have to work more on these issues, but we have to talk about them from a personal perspective as well. Every single one of us is dealing with or knows someone who's dealing with mental health or substance abuse challenges. If we don't talk about them, we cannot reduce the stigma. And if we don't talk about it also as an LGBT issue, right? As a people of color issue, as in all of our issues, then we're not going to make the progress that we need. And so, yes, I run as a pretty authentic candidate. You know, I have real conversations about different times in my life, about my family, about how I'm living my life right now, because I think it's important. Because you never know who's going to be sitting in that room who's going to be going through a similar experience or who has overcome a similar experience and is able to have a conversation with you that you would never be able to have otherwise. I believe that every single elected official and every single leader in our community must lead in an authentic way. We are not some people held on high. We are citizens. We are people with real stories. And that's what makes us good. That's what makes us great to serve, actually, and represent communities who go through this. But if you can't talk to us about your issues, how are we going to help to solve the problems? So, being an authentic candidate is extremely important. And I want everyone to know, if anyone in this room is considering running for office, that it doesn't matter your family history. It's actually probably better that you have one. It's good that we all do have one. Families just didn't show up and be 35. Or your exes, or how you came out, or what happened in college, or what's on Facebook. None of that matters. Because we've all had those experiences. All that matters is that you're able to relate your experiences and your values into the policy that you're willing to create for your communities and the fights that you're willing to lead for your communities. Because that's where we're going to find the real change. So, thanks.
Fantastic. So I'm a bad moderator. I should have figured out if that mic over there actually works. I'm looking at the tech person in the back of the room. No. So ask a question, and I will relate it so that somebody watching can hear it. But if you have a question, all right. I'm going to start back over here. Debs. So the question was, is there some advice, if you're thinking about running for office, that you could hear from our panelists? Go for it.
Get trained. That's the first thing I always tell people, go get trained. Victory Institute runs a 4-day candidate campaign training boot camp that I attended. Emily's List runs the training program. And I went to Virginia's List back home. They have both the Emerge Art, Emerge America has their training program, and I went through the Emerge Virginia boot camp. They train Democratic women to run for office. The Victory Institute trains LGBTQ candidates to run for office. Progressive Change Campaign Committee trains progressive candidates. And the Sorensen Institute will train anyone, who's, just a good government person, right? So there are so many different training opportunities that are available. You need to know what you are getting yourself into before you run. You have to have reasonable expectations about your campaign in terms of how much is it going to cost, how are you going to raise the money to do it, how many doors do you need to knock, what is going to be your message, what's the contrast. The thing I always remember from my Victory training was the message box. What do we say about us? What do we say about them? What do they say about them? What do they say about us? You've got to have that sort of thing mapped out. You've got your roadmap of people, you figure out your roadmap of people for, who's going to volunteer for your campaigns, who are going to be the first to go around people you call during call time, who are going to be the people who help you set up your social media, who are going to be the people who help with X, Y, and Z. All of that stuff you go through in your training programs. I did 10 days worth of training by the end of March of last year. In short, I was trained, y'all. I was I knew exactly what I was getting myself into, not just from 10.5 years of newspaper journalism, but I had also spent 3.5 years during that time. I was working 2 full-time jobs for a while, covering federal and state level politics for the Hotline, part of National Journal in Washington, D.C., where every single day I had to read about how campaigns were running and being operated. And so I knew exactly what I was getting myself into without having ever worked on a campaign. But if journalism wasn't your route, go volunteer for a campaign. Go see something from the inside. Go find someone who shares your values and then go work to get that person elected. And if you can't find someone who shares your values, then you need to go run and you need to go get elected. You can also get elected anyway, even if you do find someone who does. But that person may also just provide you the template of how to run and how to win. But only you will figure out. We can give you all the tips in the world for training, and each of us will tell you something unique that we as individuals did and that no one else up here did, right? But only you can prevent forest fires, and only you can figure out how you can run to win. We can give you all the tools in the world, and every training program can give you all the tools in the world. It's what you do with them that determines your outcome. And at that point, I will give you the best piece of advice I got all of last year. It was April 1st at Equality Virginia's Commonwealth Dinner. Thank you, Kath. And it was from Delegate Mark Levine, who's also out, who's now my officially assigned mentor in the House of Delegates. He had won a primary, and he told me, nothing beats hard work. Nothing beats hard work. Don't ever forget that. Nothing beats hard work.
Thank you. And I don't know that we can improve on that answer, but I will add one other element, and that is that it's not about running for office. The office is a tool. A political office is not a destination. Mm-hmm. You have to know what you want to do before you take that tool in your hand. If you're interested in education issues, you're probably not going to want to run for city council. You have to know what you want to do, what the appropriate tool is, and if you're running for office to be in office or to hold office, don't bother. It is a tool to do good work. You had a question?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, my name is Corey Greer, and I'm with Women's Action for New Directions, and we have the Women Legislators Lobby Program, WILL. My question is, I was hoping that you could illuminate some of the ways that LGBT and state and local issues intersect with the fact that the United States spends nearly half of its discretionary budget on defense.
The question was that the United States spends almost half of its national budget on defense, and how does that square with the issues that we're talking about and the issues that we run on as women and as people who care about the status and health of our communities? Anybody want to answer that?
I'll take it. A lot of times when we think about the defense budget, we think about weapon systems. But anymore, what is happening is that a lot of the budget is being spent on people. Now, we got into a war more than a decade ago that we never should have been in, never should have been in. And we are still, at some degree, still fighting that. We are still in Afghanistan. Some of the defense budget also goes to help for what they call health and morale services for family members. So when we talk about the defense budget, I think that, to be fair, what we have to do is go and look at the line items. Now, are the weapon systems there? Yes, they are. And one of the things that the weapon systems have to be there for are for our men and women who go into harm's way. Long before people knew that Amazon would deliver you a package with a drone, we understood what drones were, and we're using them because it saved lives. Instead of putting people in, we could send a drone in and get the same information. When you stop and you look at some of the technology that we have, my first assignment in Korea, there was an item on the property books. I was the supply officer. There's an item on the property books that I would not sign for because I couldn't see. I couldn't see that item. I didn't have a top secret clearance. And so the commander said I couldn't see it. What I found out later was that top secret piece of equipment was a fax machine. And so some of what the defense budget is spent on is R&D. And it's not just the R&D in the laboratory, it's the R&D also on the battlefield, and it's a very practical situation. So when we talk about the defense fund, I think what we've got to do is break it down line by line and understand that a lot of that, and not enough of it, goes for people. Some of that goes for research and development, and yes, some of it does go for weapon systems. If you stop and you think about the fact that a private, just a regular private just coming out of basic training, makes $1,547.10, I think it is, a month. That's not enough to live on. So we do need more, and sometimes, I don't know what will happen this administration, but many times the defense budget is increased because we need to give more money so people can live. So my answer is look at it line by line, and if there's a specific line item, then let's address that.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add, as a state elected official, people see a disconnect between what's happening at the federal government and what's happening at the state level. But when we're spending half of our budget on defense, and then our veterans are coming back into our communities and not getting the services that they need, that falls on the state to take care of.
Yep.
Okay? And so when we're talking about expanding services, mental health, Medicaid expansion, whatever that looks like, when the federal government is not doing their share of taking care of veterans when they come back into our communities, the states are picking that up. And so to answer your question, I do believe that the defense budget and defense spending is out of whack. You know, I do come from a military background with my mom serving in the military and my brother serving. But I do believe, and I do wonder what's going to happen when, well, I know what happens when people come back into our communities and don't have the services that they need. Or when we're not moving federal dollars over to expand Medicaid, right? Or when we're not allowing these services, these dollars, Medicaid dollars, to be spent for true mental health care, right? And so when I think about the federal defense budget, I think, wow, what else could we be doing with that money? You know, how out of whack is it? It's not different than the Department of Correction budgets in our state when we see how inflated they're getting, right? And how it's about public safety, always public safety. What about thriving as communities, right? What about public health and wealth and well-being? And so, yeah, thank you. When we're not doing that, we see huge issues. And so the defense budget does have a direct impact on us as state legislators and in our local communities.
And just because you mentioned Medicaid, by the way, so in Virginia, I was extremely proud to vote to expand Medicaid to 400,000 Virginians this year, including 3,800 of my constituents who will have that access beginning January 1st. But what that also did was it opened up so much money, $400 million, for us to raise teacher pay by 3% across the board at a time when teachers are striking in different countries or in different states. We prevented that from happening in Virginia, and that we have now more money going into opioid treatment and prevention programs, and that we are in for mental health. And because we put a cap on the motor fuels tax this year in Northern Virginia, we have $10 million more going to VRE and $7.85 million more going to our Northern Virginia bus service in between Prince William and Stafford, blah, blah. like, the fact of the matter is there are things that we can do in the states to bring home that federal money right now, whether or not it's going to be tied to defense spending, but we have to have the political will and to be smart enough to actually go about doing it, while at the same time electing people who are well qualified to Congress in the first place, who can make those sound, reasonable decisions when it comes to navigating a budget and understanding what's in it. I knew I was well qualified for the House of Delegates because this fits directly into my wheelhouse of knowledge, but I did not feel the same about Congress, for example, because I don't have the background that she does, for example. You don't have to have that, but that's why she was a viable candidate, right? But at the same time, if you have people who you elect who understand that level of minutia, who really get federal policy, great. But that person who knows federal policy, might know foreign policy inside and out, they might not know a whole lot about water infrastructure and might not do well in the Soil and Water Conservation District Board. Just saying.
So we appreciate your time and attention today. I would encourage you to, you can find all of our candidates on the victoryfund.org website, and the other work we do, our candidate training on the victoryinstitute.org website. These are remarkable women and amazing public servants, and I would ask you to give them a hand and thank them for their time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Hey. Hi, Carter. It's nice to meet you, Danica. Thank you.